What happens when a pop icon walks into a daytime studio expecting warmth and walks out carrying a label she never agreed to wear? The lights of the set burned bright, hotter than usual, like they sensed something was about to fracture. The audience clapped on cue, but the applause felt thin, stretched, uncertain. Miley Cyrus stepped through the curtain with a smile that had survived stadiums and scandals, a smile practiced in front of mirrors and millions. Yet even she felt the air shift. She took her seat, crossing one booted leg over the other, fingers tapping once against her knee as if grounding herself. Across the table, Whoopi Goldberg leaned back, cards in hand, eyes sharp with the authority of someone who had seen generations of stars rise and fall on this very stage. The introduction rolled, compliments layered over clips from Miley's career, her evolution, her risks, her reinventions. Miley nodded, thanked them, laughed at the right moments. Inside, she felt that familiar coil of caution. She had learned, the hard way, that daytime smiles could hide nighttime knives. The first question came soft, about music, about growth, about freedom. Miley answered smoothly, voice warm, audience murmuring approval. Then Whoopi leaned forward, elbows on the table, tone shifting just enough to change the temperature of the room. "You've always pushed back against expectations," Whoopi said, measured, almost kind. "Some people say you thrive on controversy, that you define yourself by shock. Is that who you are now?" The word now hung there, heavy. Miley's smile tightened. She inhaled slow. She could hear her own heartbeat, could feel cameras inch closer. "I don't think of it that way," she began, choosing calm. "I think of it as honesty. I grew up in front of everyone, and I've had to figure myself out publicly." Whoopi nodded, but didn't retreat. "But parents watching at home," she continued, "they wonder what message you're sending. They remember a different Miley." A ripple moved through the audience, whispers like wind through dry grass. Miley felt heat rise in her chest, not anger yet, but something sharper, a warning. She remembered being 16, smiling on this same show, eager to please. She remembered promises made to herself since then. "I can't be responsible for everyone's comfort," she said carefully. "I can only be responsible for my truth." Joy Behar interjected with a joke. Laughter broke the tension for a second, but Whoopi held her gaze on Miley. "Truth is powerful," Whoopi said. "But influence is too." That's when Miley straightened, shoulders back, voice gaining edge. "Influence doesn't mean pretending to be someone I'm not," she said. "And I think sometimes people want to freeze you in a moment that feels safe to them." The applause came louder this time, divided but real. Miley felt the rush, the old familiar spark of standing her ground. Still, she sensed the conversation slipping towards something more personal. Whoopi shuffled her cards, then looked up with a frown that wasn't quite a frown. "Some critics say you reject your past because you're ashamed of it," she said. The room went silent. Miley blinked once. In that silence lived years of headlines, of shame imposed, of explanations demanded. She leaned forward, mirroring Whoopi now. "That's not who I am," she said, voice low, steady. "And it's not fair to put that on me." A murmur swelled. Cameras zoomed. Somewhere backstage, a producer whispered into a headset. Miley could feel the moment crystallizing, the interview slipping into confrontation. She took a breath, then looked straight into the lens. "Before we go any further," she said, "if you're enjoying real conversations like this, make sure you subscribe to Talk Flair, like this video, and comment right now, because moments like this don't happen by accident." The audience laughed, surprised, applause breaking out. Even Whoopi cracked a half smile, but the tension remained, coiled and waiting. Miley turned back to the table, eyes steady, ready. She had answered the first challenge, but she knew deep down this was only the beginning, and the room seemed to know it too, buzzing with the electricity of what might come next. Whoopi adjusted her glasses, clearly deciding whether to press or pivot. The silence stretched long enough for discomfort to bloom. Miley felt her jaw tighten, memories flickering of tabloid covers screaming contradictions, of being told she was too much and not enough in the same breath. She thought of her fans, the ones who grew up alongside her, who learned that change was not betrayal but survival. She glanced at Sunny Hostin, who watched intently, lips pressed together, sensing the stakes. A cough echoed from the audience. Someone shifted in their seat. The studio lights hummed, relentless. Whoopi finally spoke again, voice lower, heavier. "Do you think the industry failed you?" she asked. Miley paused, considering the trap hidden inside empathy. "I think the industry reflects us," she said. "It rewards masks until they crack." The words landed, and this time the applause was hesitant, thoughtful. Miley exhaled, feeling both exposed and grounded. She knew the conversation had crossed a line of comfort, that whatever happened next would ripple far beyond this table. She met Whoopi's eyes without blinking, neither hostile nor submissive, just present. In that gaze lived a quiet challenge, a refusal to be reduced. The clock on the wall ticked toward commercial, but the moment refused to be contained, swelling with unfinished questions, with emotions that could not be edited out, only witnessed. The audience leaned forward as one, sensing history in the making, sensing that something honest had cracked the polished surface of daytime television. Miley rested her hands on the table, palms down, anchoring herself, while producers debated in hushed tones. Whatever came after the break, she knew one thing with certainty. She would not shrink, not today, not ever again. The cameras kept rolling, hungry and unblinking, as unresolved tension thickened the already electric studio air tonight. The red light blinked off as the show cut to commercial, but the tension didn't fade with it. If anything, it thickened, filling the studio like smoke that refused to clear. Miley stayed seated, hands still flat on the table, eyes fixed somewhere between the audience and the floor. Applause from moments earlier echoed faintly in her ears, now replaced by murmurs and the shuffle of crew feet. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, lips pressed together, gaze drifting toward a producer just off camera. No one spoke right away, and that silence said more than any argument could. Miley felt the familiar pressure of being watched without being seen. Cameras might be resting, but judgment never did. She rolled her shoulders once, slow, loosening tension that had crept up her spine. Somewhere behind her, an audience member whispered, "She's right, though," while another replied, "But Whoopi's not wrong either." The divided reactions felt like a mirror of her entire life, two truths battling for space. Whoopi finally broke the quiet, voice low, meant only for the table. "You good?" she asked. Miley nodded, though the word felt insufficient. "I'm fine," she said, then added more honestly, "I just want to be understood without having to defend my existence every time." Whoopi studied her for a moment, expression unreadable. There was history in that look, decades of being both the challenger and the challenged. "This isn't an attack," she said. "It's a conversation." Miley met her eyes. "It stops feeling like a conversation when I'm the only one expected to explain myself." A stagehand raised a finger, signaling 30 seconds. The audience straightened, sensing the return. Sunny Hostin leaned closer to Miley, her voice gentle. "Just breathe," she murmured. "Say what you mean." The lights flared back to full intensity. The red light snapped on again. Applause erupted on cue, louder than before, charged with anticipation. The host introductions were skipped, momentum too strong to waste. Whoopi turned back to Miley, posture composed, but the edge remained. "We were talking about influence," Whoopi said smoothly, "and whether rejecting your past sends a message you may not intend." Miley exhaled, slow and deliberate. "I don't reject my past," she said. "I honor it by not being trapped in it." The audience reacted immediately, a mix of cheers and murmurs. Miley felt something open in her chest, a door she'd kept closed for years. She continued, voice gaining warmth and strength. "I was a kid. I did the best I could with what I knew. Holding that version of me hostage so others feel comfortable doesn't honor her. It erases her growth." Joy Behar tilted her head. "But don't you think some people miss that innocence?" she asked. Miley smiled sadly. "Innocence isn't something you lose when you grow up," she said. "It's something people project onto you when it suits them." That line hit hard. The audience clapped louder, longer. Whoopi raised a hand slightly, letting it die down. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in focus. "So when critics say you've gone too far," she asked, "you think that's about them, not you?" "I think fear talks louder than understanding," Miley replied. "Especially when a woman decides she doesn't need permission anymore." A collective intake of breath swept the room. Miley could feel it now, the shift. This wasn't just about her. It never had been. She thought of every young girl watching, every artist told to soften, to smile, to stay palatable. She felt her voice tremble for half a second, then steady. "I'm not here to shock anyone," she said. "I'm here to live." Whoopi leaned forward again. "And what about accountability?" she asked. "When your choices hurt or confuse people who looked up to you?" Miley nodded. "I listen," she said. "I learn. But I don't shrink. Accountability doesn't mean self-erasure." The audience applauded again, some rising slightly from their seats before sitting back down. Sunny nodded emphatically. Joy pursed her lips, thoughtful. Whoopi paused, fingers tapping once against her cards. For a moment, it seemed like she might pivot, offer a bridge. Instead, she asked, "Do you ever regret pushing so hard against expectations?" Miley didn't answer right away. She looked out at the crowd, at faces young and old, curious, skeptical, supportive. She thought of nights spent questioning herself, of mornings waking up still standing. "I regret the moments I doubted myself," she said quietly. "Not the ones where I fought for who I am." That quiet landed heavier than any shout. The applause that followed was slower, deeper, more unified. Miley felt a strange mix of relief and vulnerability, like stepping into sunlight after a storm. She sensed Whoopi absorbing it too, weighing her next move. The tension hadn't vanished, but it had transformed, less combative, more reflective. Whoopi finally nodded. "That takes courage," she said, and for the first time, there was no challenge in her tone. Just acknowledgement. Miley smiled, small but genuine. "It takes survival," she replied. The camera pulled back slightly, capturing the full table, the audience, the charged calm that now settled over the studio. Miley rested back in her chair, heart still racing, but steadier now. She knew not everyone would agree with her. She knew headlines were already forming. But in this moment, she felt something rare on a stage like this, honesty without apology. As the segment wound down, applause filled the room once more, not explosive but sustained. Miley glanced at Whoopi, who gave a subtle nod in return. It wasn't resolution, not fully, but it was recognition. And as the lights glowed and the audience clapped, Miley understood that the real confrontation wasn't just with a host across a table. It was with a world still learning how to let women grow out loud. The applause faded, but the energy didn't. It lingered, vibrating beneath the polished smiles and practiced transitions, like a live wire humming just under the surface. Miley took a sip of water, her hand steady now, though her pulse still thudded in her ears. She could feel sweat cooling at the back of her neck under the studio lights. This was the part people never saw. The moment after you say the thing you've rehearsed in your head for years, when you realize it's no longer yours alone. Whoopi shifted in her chair, exhaling slowly, as if recalibrating. The producer's voice murmured faintly through the earpieces, urging them forward, reminding them of time. But time felt warped in the studio, stretched thin by what had already been said. Sunny glanced between Miley and Whoopi, sensing unfinished business. Joy adjusted her notes, eyebrows raised, curiosity sparking again. "So," Joy said lightly, trying to ease the weight, "what does freedom look like for you now?" Miley almost smiled at the simplicity of it, at how deceptively gentle the question sounded. She leaned back, eyes lifting toward the ceiling for a split second, gathering herself. "Freedom," she said slowly, "is waking up and not negotiating with shame." The audience reacted instantly. A low rippled through the seats, followed by scattered claps. Miley continued, the words flowing easier now, like a dam cracked open. "It's trusting my instincts again. For a long time, every decision felt like it had to be approved by strangers." Whoopi tilted her head. "But isn't that the price of fame?" she asked. "People invest in you. They feel ownership." Miley's jaw tightened just slightly. "That's the lie," she replied. "Connection doesn't mean ownership. Support doesn't mean control." The room went still again. The cameras pushed in closer, hungry. Miley felt a familiar heat rise, but this time it wasn't defensive. It was resolute. She leaned forward, forearms resting on the table, posture open but firm. "I'm grateful for my fans," she said. "I love them, but loving them doesn't mean abandoning myself." Sunny nodded. "That's a hard boundary for people to accept," she said. "It is," Miley agreed. "Especially when they're used to benefiting from you having none." A sharp intake of breath echoed from somewhere in the audience. Whoopi's eyebrows lifted, not offended but alert. "You sound angry," she observed. Miley met her gaze without flinching. "I sound honest," she corrected. "Anger is part of healing when you've been misunderstood for a long time." That line hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Miley felt a flicker of vulnerability, a crack where old wounds lived. She thought of the headlines that reduced her to phases, to costumes, to cautionary tales. She thought of interviews where she'd laughed things off to survive, where she'd swallowed words to keep the peace. Not today. Whoopi tapped her cards against the table once, thoughtfully. "Do you think," she asked slower now, "that sometimes people push because they're worried about you?" Miley's expression softened, just a fraction. "I know some do," she said. And I appreciate concern when it comes from care, not control. But worry shouldn't come wrapped in judgment. The audience applauded again, stronger this time. Someone shouted, "Say it," from the back, drawing laughter and more claps. Miley smiled briefly, then grew serious again. "I've made mistakes," she said. "I'll make more. But I won't let mistakes be used as proof that I don't know myself." Joy leaned in. "Do you feel judged more harshly because you're a woman?" she asked. Miley didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said plainly. Without question. A wave of reaction swept the room, nods, murmurs, applause. Miley pressed on, voice steady but charged. "Men reinvent themselves and they're called brave. Women do it and we're called unstable." Whoopi looked down at her cards, then back up, considering. The studio felt divided and united all at once, tension braided with truth. "So where does that leave us?" Whoopi asked. "As media. As hosts." Miley paused, sensing the weight of the question. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the space itself. "It leaves you with power," she said gently. "And power can either box people in or let them breathe." The silence that followed was deep, reflective. Even the audience seemed to hold back, waiting. Miley felt exposed again, but grounded. She wasn't performing now. She was speaking from a place that didn't need applause to validate it. Whoopi nodded slowly. "Fair," she said. The word landed like a small bridge laid across a gap that had felt impassable minutes earlier. The producer's voice cut in again, reminding them they were nearing the end of the segment. Sunny glanced at the clock, then at Miley. "Any final thought you want to leave people with?" she asked. Miley looked out at the audience one more time, then straight into the camera. She felt the weight of countless eyes beyond the studio, watching from couches and phones and break rooms. "Growth isn't betrayal," she said. "And choosing yourself doesn't mean you don't care about anyone else." The applause was immediate and sustained, rolling through the studio like thunder. Miley leaned back, chest rising as she finally took a full breath. Whoopi joined the clapping, slower but sincere. The moment felt less like a victory and more like a reckoning, one that wouldn't end when the cameras cut. As the show moved toward its closing beats, Miley sensed it clearly now. Whatever happened next, online, in headlines, in comment sections, this conversation had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She had said the things she'd needed to say, not perfectly, not painlessly, but truthfully. And somewhere in the charged air of that studio, she felt the shift begin, quiet but irreversible. The cameras finally cut, but the moment didn't end. It followed everyone off the set like a shadow that refused to detach. Applause still echoed faintly as the audience stood, some clapping with conviction, others hesitating, unsure what they had just witnessed but certain it mattered. Miley rose from her chair slowly, rolling her shoulders as if releasing something heavy she'd been carrying for years. A few audience members reached out as she passed, murmuring words of support, gratitude, awe. One woman whispered, "Thank you for saying that," and Miley nodded, eyes soft, throat tight. Whoopi remained seated for a beat longer than usual, staring down at the table, her cards untouched. There was no smile, no frown, just contemplation. When she finally stood, she caught Miley's eye across the stage. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Whoopi gave a small, deliberate nod. Not an apology. Not a victory. An acknowledgement. Miley returned it, subtle but genuine, before disappearing behind the curtain. Backstage buzzed with energy, producers speaking over one another, assistants checking phones already lighting up with notifications. Miley's publicist approached cautiously, searching her face. "You okay?" she asked. Miley exhaled, a real breath this time. "Yeah," she said. "I am." Within minutes, clips began spreading. Short, sharp edits raced across social media. "That's not who I am," looping again and again. Captions screamed confrontation, clash, showdown. Some painted Miley as defiant, others as disrespectful. Some hailed her as brave. Others accused her of being defensive. The internet, as always, split itself neatly down the middle. On X, hashtags surged. Hashtag "That's Not Who I Am" climbed rapidly. Hashtag "Miley on the View" trended worldwide. Fans dissected every expression, every pause. Comment sections filled with debates about growth, influence, and who gets to decide when a woman has changed too much. Long threads appeared from people who saw themselves in Miley's words, who felt named for the first time. Others sided with Whoopi, arguing responsibility, legacy, concern. The conversation exploded far beyond the studio walls. Entertainment news ran breaking banners within the hour. Panels debated whether the exchange was overdue or inappropriate. Some called it the most honest moment daytime television had seen in years. Others labeled it uncomfortable, even reckless. Late-night hosts joked about it, but their laughter carried an edge. This wasn't just viral. It was unsettling. Whoopi addressed it briefly the next day, calm and composed. "Strong conversations aren't meant to be easy," she said. "They're meant to be real." She didn't apologize. She didn't double down. She let the moment stand as it was. Miley, meanwhile, posted a single message. No rant. No clarification thread. Just a photo from backstage, her jacket slung over her shoulder, eyes steady. The caption read, "Growth isn't betrayal." Nothing more. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of likes. Thousands of comments from people thanking her for putting words to feelings they'd carried quietly. Artists, actors, musicians chimed in, sharing their own stories of being frozen in past versions of themselves. Even critics softened, some admitting the exchange had forced them to reconsider long-held assumptions. Days later, interviews referenced it constantly. Miley didn't shy away. "I said what I needed to say," she told one outlet. Not to win. To be honest. She refused to frame it as a feud. "It wasn't about fighting," she said. "It was about being seen." And that was the part that lingered. The sense that something deeper than a celebrity clash had occurred. In that studio, under those lights, a narrative had cracked. The idea that reinvention must always be justified. That growth requires permission. That women owe consistency more than they owe themselves. Fans replayed the clip not for the tension, but for the pause before Miley spoke, the steadiness in her voice when she said, "That's not who I am." In that sentence, many heard their own defense, their own boundary, their own quiet rebellion. The audience members who had been there would later describe the feeling the same way. Electric, uncomfortable, unforgettable. "It felt like watching someone take their power back in real time," one said. "You don't forget that." And as the headlines eventually faded, as the next controversy took its place, the words remained. Shared. Saved. Quoted. Because moments like that don't disappear. They settle. They wait. They resurface when someone needs them most. Now it's your turn. Was Miley right to push back the way she did? Or did Whoopi ask the questions that needed to be asked? Was it a clash, or a necessary conversation we don't see often enough on television? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear where you stand. And if you want more explosive, emotional, behind-the-moment stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to Talk Flair. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and stay with us, because the next story might hit even closer to home.